And everybody here okay in the back? Is it too loud? Good evening. My name is Terry McFall. On behalf of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation and the city of Stilwell, welcome to this public hearing. By way of introduction, seated to my right at the tape recorder is Mr. Kevin Larios of the Planning Division, who's the environmental coordinator for this project. To my left is Ms. Helene Murdoch of the Urban Design Division, who's a geometric engineer for this project. To her left is Mr. Gary Bartoshowski. Gary is one of our relocation agents in the right-of-way division. In the audience, we have Mr. Bob Simpson, who is the division engineer for this area. Mr. Bob Rose, who is the chief engineer for the Department of Transportation. Elected officials in the office I know of is Representative Adair. And if I missed anybody else, if you want to be recognized, I would be more than happy to recognize you. I don't know if we've got an elected official who wants to be recognized, or you just waving at somebody. This public hearing is being conducted on the 24th day of July, 1992, in the Stilwell Community Building located at 6th and Popular, Stilwell. Its purpose is to discuss a proposal to reconstruct US 59 from the junction of State Highway 100 East north through Stilwell to State Highway 51 West in Adair County. As far as the hearing agenda, I have a few more introductory remarks, then I will briefly go over the need for the project and the alternatives we are studying. Kevin will then summarize the finding of the environmental assessment. Lane will present the design aspects of the different alternatives we looked at. Kevin will summarize the findings of the environmental assessment for each of the alternatives. Finally, Gary will explain the right-of-way acquisition and relocation procedures that will be used on this project. Following these presentations, we will have a brief question and answer session. Due to transcribing difficulties, the question and answer session will not be recorded. Instead, you should use this time to get your questions answered and form any opinions that you would like to present for the official record. During the question and answer session, we will answer questions as best we can on what we know to this day. However, once the recorder is turned on, we will not respond to any comments. Response to the comments will be included in the final environmental assessment. From this recording, a verbatim transcript will be prepared. If speaking before an audience is difficult for you, or you just don't want to get up and say anything right here, you may submit written comments. If you do submit written comments, they must be received by the Office of the Planning Director, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, no later than August 3rd, 1992. We have pre-addressed envelopes on the sign-in table. There's 2 signs above our aerials on the wall, and it's on the front of the podium. For your convenience, we do have the pre-addressed envelope, so that may be the easiest way. Both written and oral comments will be considered equally and will become a part of the official transcript. The displays that you see here tonight will be available at the Oklahoma Department of Transportation in the Planning Division, 200 Northeast 21st Street in Oklahoma City, along with the official transcript as soon as we get it transcribed. We should have it available sometime shortly after the cutoff date for receipt of written comments. To conclude my introductory remarks, we do have some of our latest highway maps and our anti-litter campaign bags and bumper stickers for anyone that would like to have one of those. Also, located on the table are some of our relocation brochures if anybody would like to have one of those. Projects such as this is developed in phases. Phase 1 consists of preparing preliminary plans sufficient to complete a draft environmental assessment, holding a public hearing, which we are doing now, and receiving approval from the Federal Highway Administration. In order to apply for approval from the Federal Highway Administration, we will submit the transcript from this hearing attached to a revised version of the environmental assessment, which will include responses to the comments that are made for record tonight and those that were received in writing. We will ask them for a finding of no significant impact on this project. The Federal Highway Administration is satisfied that we have complied with all federal laws and regulations, and there is no significant environmental impacts, they will issue their approval and Phase 2 can begin. It consists of preparing right-of-way plans and acquiring any necessary property. Finally, Phase 3 consists of preparing final design plans, selecting a contractor to build the project. Our latest target date for selection of a contractor, or what we call letting in the Department of Transportation, is November of 1994. With regard to the need for the project, present traffic volumes along this facility range from approximately 8,000 vehicles today to 16,000 vehicles per day. In the future, these volumes are anticipated to increase to 16,500 to 26,000 vehicles per day, respectively. These volumes are well in excess of what can be safely handled by the present facility, which is reflected in the accident rates for this section of US 59. Additional travel lanes will be required to provide a safe and efficient facility for future road users. Development of alternatives for the project has been extremely difficult. Construction costs have escalated from the initially programmed $1.8 million to somewhere in the neighborhood of $7 to $7.5 million. However, we have developed 4 alternates for this project. Alternate 1, and by the way, before I started with that, we have the arrows displayed. The directions are reversed. North is this way. South is that way. When we had them laid out, when we taped them up on the table, we didn't know which wall we had them on. If we had room, we could put them on this wall. The directions would have been okay. Alternate 1 is shown on the first aerial photograph to my right. Alternate 2 and 2B are shown on the center photo, and alternate 3 is shown on the photo to the far rear. Alternate 4 is the do nothing or leave it as is alternate. Alternate 1 consists of reconstructing US 59 to a 4-lane or 5-lane facility on dual alignment from the junction of State Highway 100 East north through Stilwell on Front Street to State Highway 51 West. In addition, State Highway 100 West, locally known, I think, as Locust Street, would be extended east from the US 59 from the present US 59 State Highway 100 West junction to the proposed facility. This segment of State Highway 100 West would be a 2-lane facility. Alternate 2 consists of 2 variations and are labeled as alternate 2 and 2B. Both alternates would provide a 4-lane facility along existing US 59 at the north and south extents of Stilwell, and a divided 1-way pair of 2-lane facilities within Stilwell. The 2 alternatives differ only in that alternate 2 would direct northbound traffic along Front Street beginning immediately north of Plum Street. Alternate 2B would direct northbound traffic along First Street beginning at Cedar Street. Southbound traffic would utilize existing US 59 for both of these alternates. Alternate 3 consists of reconstructing US 59 to a 4-lane or 5-lane facility on existing alignment, 2nd Street. 3 variations of this alternate were considered as follows. 1, offsetting the alignment approximately 16 feet east of the existing center line of US 59. 2, offsetting the alignment approximately 16 feet west of the existing center line of US 59. And 3, widening symmetrically about the existing center line of US 59. The offset alignments would begin at approximately State Highway 100 West and extend north to approximately State Highway 51 East. At this time, I'd like to call on Mrs. Murdoch, who will present the proposed design features of the alternate.
Good evening. My name is Helene Dallas Murdoch, and I'm a civil engineer with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. And I'm the designer that came up with these alternates that you see tonight. What I'd like to talk about is to give you a little bit of background and the type of issues we look at when when we design preliminary plans. I'd like to discuss some of the design features of each one of these, and then I'd like to tell you a little bit about what happens after we pick an alignment. First of all, some of the background. Before we start looking at any roadway, the first thing you have to do is find out what's wrong with the existing roadway. For US 59, you start on the south end. There's a railroad bridge that's there, lovely arched bridge. Right now, it needs to be widened. It needs to carry 4 lanes of traffic, minimum, and it needs to be strengthened. That means it needs to be able to carry heavier trucks than what it can carry right now. Our bridge division has looked at that and has decided that because of the type of bridge it is, and because of the different factors in there, the best way to handle this would be to reconstruct a new bridge. That means you're not using the bridge that's there, we would put a new one in. The roadway that connects up to it has some sharp curves. It has some hills that aren't really what we would like to be as far as safety. So we'd like to flatten those out, flatten the curves out, flatten the hills out. So that's part of what you see realigning. The new bridge is offset from where the existing one is so that you can build it and keep your existing bridge in so you can get across the railroad. And then once the new one's in place, you can switch your roadway. Through the town of Stilwell itself, you're all aware that it carries a tremendous amount of traffic. The amount of traffic that goes through Stilwell really could handle 4 lanes of roadway through Stilwell. You've got 2. In 20 years, your traffic is going to basically double, which means it's going to be worse than it is now. So we need at least 4 lanes plus turn lanes to get all the traffic through. Because of all that traffic, we also have a large number of accidents. It's 3 to 4 times the rate of a comparable highway or through the rest of Oklahoma. That's a lot of accidents. A lot of it because of the amount of traffic. Some of it's due to some of your signals, your stop signs, where you can see, where you can't see. You also have some difficulty with some drainage. Curb and gutters would be nice, storm sewers would be nice, those kind of things that really aren't there now. After we look at these kind of issues and we start looking at what we can do, what we can build, we're also looking at certain things. Some of those things are maintaining access to homes and businesses during construction and after construction. That means all of these alternates that you see here, we're not going to landlock anybody. They're still going to be able to get off the existing roadways. Your local streets that are there now will still connect up to the new roadways. If they have driveways on there, those driveways will also remain. New driveways, that kind of thing, would be handled like our normal policy is on driveways. We also look at how much land each one of these alternates needs to take. 4 lanes is going to take up a lot more room than 2 lanes of traffic will. Basically, it's going to be 5 lanes when you put turn lanes in. So you need room for your roadway, you need room for your drainage structures, you need room for sidewalks. This all takes land, and every alternate is going to take some land, regardless of where we go. So when I go through and I look at where to take a roadway, we're trying to minimize how much damage we do. We're going to do damage, but you want to minimize that. And you want to fix as many problems that's on the existing facility as we feasibly can. Now I'd like to go through some of the alternates. The first one you see, alternate 1, goes next to the railroad. It shows a new bridge crossing. It shows a new intersection where State Highway 100 East comes in. It'll bring an alignment down and go across Front Street. Front Street would be 5 lanes. Again, it's going to have driveways, it's going to have existing roadways. You see a few of the roadways in there in black that connect up. Some of those are extensions. Some of existing roadways, 100 West is an extension. Some of them at the north end, there'll be how they would tie in. We wouldn't have Y intersections. Y intersections are very difficult to see without getting hit. They would be teed up and would continue all the way to 51 West. Sidewalks on this would be on the west side of the roadway. There's no need for sidewalks against the railroad. Nobody really wants, there's not very much land through there. Curb and gutters would be through Stilwell. These also means storm sewer. There's going to be probably ditches on the south end where the railroad portion is. That would be ditches pretty much like it is. It would be roadway with shoulders. And we would be doing some signalizations where the roadway crosses the railroad by the fruit cannery. There's two of them there, and there's another one to the north. Those would all need signals. They would need crossbucks. They would need gates. All those things. The grades through there, they're basically going to be the same as they are through the middle of town. The south end, we're going to be building a hill to get back up where the railroad crossing is. So the south end of that is all going to be regraded. The only place we would have a retaining wall, there was some question on retaining wall. On this particular alternate retaining wall, we only expect it to be in front of the substation, the electrical substation. And that would be the only place. The reason for this is because substations, you can't regrade that portion. It's very expensive to move substations. If we got into any portion of it, we would have to move the whole thing. For the homes and things, we could regrade your dirt lines into your front yards, and then your yards would be back to you. So the possibility is probably in front of the substation, and maybe along the railroad. And those crossings across the railroad would stay. The local roads would stay, your driveways would stay. The next alternate 2, is the one-way pairs. There's 2 of them sitting there. There's some question on whether we should go up First Street or go up Front Street with our northbound traffic. There's some historical properties through there. There's some utility lines. At this point, we're still looking at the 2. There's a few environmental things that we're looking at that would make one better than the other. You're basically staying within existing right-of-way on those. There's some parts where the road deviates, and it'll be a little bit different. Again, the south end of town, elevations change through there. They come about Plum Street, somewhere in there. It comes back to your regular grade. One-way pairs normally function better if they're only a block apart. That's why First Street was considered. US 59 is considered because it's an existing facility. If we went along Front Street next to the railroad, there's a lot more room through there. There's a lot less houses through there. But it's 2 blocks away. Alternate 3, the far end one, takes you along Stilwell itself, along 59 itself. Through there, we're going to need a 5-lane section, as if we went along the railroad itself. Right now, you have some turn lanes. You're talking about taking quite a bit of right-of-way, either on one side or the other, or both, depending on which way you would go with that alternate. We take quite a few businesses, quite a few homes, quite a bit of land. The elevations basically stay the same like the others. The south portion to get across the railroad tracks, the elevations change through there. The rest of US 59 is the same. It would be curb and gutter through the town, sidewalks, storm sewers. Um, And the fourth alternate is not shown would be to do nothing, to leave it alone. You know, that's always consideration. If there's too many things in the way, that's always a consideration. We would leave you exactly with what you have now. It's not shown because you all know what's out there now. After this meeting and after we choose an alignment, there's still quite a bit of work to be done. We still have a survey to be done to find out exactly where your land is, exactly where your drainage is, where your grades are. We need to set those grades. We need to look into your drainage, look into all your traffic control, which means stop signs, striping, signals, all those things. And we need to find out where we need to put our utilities, how much earthwork we need to do. All those things take a lot of work, and you don't do it in the preliminary stage. You do as much as we can, and these are all approximate with the amount of information we have now. Once we pick one, we'll go in and study it all in a lot more detail. I've talked to you about the kind of issues you need in preliminary design in each one of these. A little bit about what happens after this meeting. As far as design goes, we need comments from you if you have anything that you think is an issue that we overlooked, something that maybe we didn't know about. Those are all things that we can change, that we can deal with in the design process if we know about them. And that's part of the reason why you have a public meeting. So if you have ideas, things like that, I would encourage you to make comments today or do it in writing. The only way that we can address your problems is if we know about them. I think that concludes my portion of the speech. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Kevin will now present the findings of the environmental assessment that we've done for these different alternatives.
Good evening. My name is Kevin Larios. I'm with the Transportation Planning Branch of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. My role in this project is to prepare an environmental assessment. And here's what a copy of it looks like. There's about 4 of them floating around the area here. But don't remove these during the hearing. After the hearing, you can see me, and I'll be glad to give it to you if you're interested in having one. Examination of the anticipated social, economic, and environmental effects of the proposed reconstruction of US 59 Stilwell were developed in conformance with all applicable Federal Highway Administration rules and regulations in the action plan of the Oklahoma Department of Transportation. I will now summarize the findings of the draft environmental assessment. The department coordinated with and solicited comments from 31 local, city, state, and federal agencies. 15 replies were received. A public meeting to discuss the major location and design features of the proposed US 59 project was held October 28, 1991, here in the Stilwell Community Building. Alternate number designations in the department's solicitation letter and the public meeting differ slightly from the EA and what is presented in this hearing. Alternates 1 and 2, as described here tonight and in the environmental assessment, are identical to those described in the solicitation letter. However, alternate 3 in the solicitation letter referred to the original proposed east bypass, which was later eliminated from further consideration due to the lack of bypassable traffic. Alternates 1, 2, 3, as described here at this hearing and the environmental assessment, and the original alternate 3 proposed bypass were presented at the public meeting last October. Alternate 2B is a new proposal which was developed after the solicitation letter and the public meeting. Land use along the alternate locations are primarily a mixture of residential, commercial, and industrial. Reconstruction of US 59 will not likely alter these trends to a substantial degree. The proposed project will not affect any publicly owned parks, archaeological sites, recreational sites, nor wildlife or waterfowl refuge. Potential impacts to historic structures or properties have been considered. The department archaeologist has prepared a preliminary assessment of the potential cultural resources impacts for the proposed alternates. This preliminary assessment was reviewed by the State Historic Preservation Officer. To date, based on this preliminary assessment, a number of potential historic structures and/or properties directly or indirectly impacted by each alternate are as follows: 3 for alternate 1, 3 for alternate 2, at least 2 for alternate 2B, and for alternate 3, 6 for the east side alignment, 9 for the west side alignment, and 11 for the symmetrical alignment. It must be noted that a historic properties evaluation is currently underway for alternate 2B along First Street, and the exact impacts, if any, to historic structures and/or properties have not been determined. The existing arch bridge over the Kansas City Southern Railroad is eligible for the National Register of Historic Places and will be affected by all the build alternates. Further evaluation and documentation as part of the federal approval process will be required for this bridge and any other historic structures and/or properties affected by the preferred alternate. The effects of the proposed project upon community cohesion have been considered. While construction will provide a safer and more adequate transportation facility within Stilwell, the proposal may affect existing neighborhood and business characteristics. In particular, alternate 2B would direct large volumes of traffic on First Street, which consists of predominantly residential development. And alternate 3 could have a disruptive effect on business during construction. Gary will speak in a moment about anticipated displacement, so I will not duplicate that material here. The proposed project is consistent with the Oklahoma State Department of Health Air Quality Service implementation plan, and no effect on air quality is expected. A noise analysis using Federal Highway Administration approval procedures was conducted for the project. The analysis indicated that the Federal Highway Administration desired noise levels will be exceeded for several residential receptors for future traffic conditions along the proposed project. Mitigation of elevated noise levels by constructing noise barriers are not considered feasible along roadways such as US 59 because of the lack of access control. Without access control, the gaps that would be required for street and driveway connections would make these mitigation measures ineffective. Water quality will not be affected by the proposed project, and the erosion control measures will be implemented throughout the project to minimize erosion and sedimentation. Measures to minimize flooding along the proposed project will be incorporated into the design of the project. All the Corps of Engineers regulations and plans to control flooding will be met. The environmental assessment covers what Terry has mentioned earlier, such as the location and description of the project, the need for the project, and the alternative study, as well as all the information I have briefly summarized here tonight. If you have not reviewed the environmental assessment, I encourage you to do so. And if you have any questions about the EA, feel free to ask me during the intermission. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. The environmental assessment he's talking about looks like this. There's several of them around the room if you'd like to get one and look at it. Gary Bartoshowski of our right-of-way division now will explain our relocation, right-of-way acquisition procedures to you.
Good evening. My name is Gary Bartoshowski, and I'm with the Oklahoma Department of Transportation Right-of-Way Division. And I would like to briefly explain to you the two main aspects of the Department's right-of-way acquisition program. First, the steps used to acquire the property, and second, the relocation assistance program, which is designed to assist those individuals, families, and businesses which will be displaced by the project. The steps used to acquire the property begin with the appraisal stage. Once the final right-of-way limits are established, an appraisal of the property to be acquired is made by a competent appraiser who is familiar with property values in the area. You as an owner are given the opportunity to accompany the appraiser on his appraisal inspection. It is suggested that if at all possible, you accompany him on this inspection and point out any items which might not be readily visible to the appraiser which would add value to your property. Such items may be private underground water lines, septic systems, or things that way. Once the property has been acquired, the appraisal will be reviewed by a senior review appraiser, and a value will be placed on the property to be acquired. Once all the appraisals have been completed and reviewed, we are ready to begin the acquisition phase. At this point, all property owners will be contacted by a right-of-way agent who will explain the right-of-way requirements, what effect it will have on the property, and at this time the owner will be presented with a written offer to acquire the right-of-way. As an owner, you will be given sufficient time to consider the offer. When the offer is accepted, the right-of-way agent will prepare all documents necessary to transfer title to the state, and payment will be made in about 30 days. If you as an owner do not agree with the state's offer, you're entitled to have this amount established by the courts through a condemnation procedure. I'm going to briefly go ahead and describe what happens in a condemnation procedure. Once the state has filed a condemnation suit, the court will appoint 3 commissioners who will go out and establish a value for the property to be acquired. The commissioners will enter this amount in their commissioner's report and turn it back into the court. At that time, the department can take and deposit the amount of the commissioner's report with the county clerk. And of course, at this time, these funds are made available to the landowner to withdraw and to use. And of course, also at that time, while the department receives legal possession to the property being acquired. At that time, we would go ahead with the construction of the project. I might add, sometimes people think that condemnation means we just take the property and don't compensate people for it. And of course, that's not the case. The whole purpose of the condemnation process is to determine the amount that we will pay for the right-of-way being acquired. Once these funds are deposited with the county, once the commissioner's report is turned in, that is not necessarily the amount of the award that you receive. Each party has 60 days with which to file a petition with the court for a jury trial. If neither party files for a jury trial, at the end of that 60 days, the commissioner's report automatically becomes the award. If either one of the 2 parties files a petition for jury trial, and it is not withdrawn at any time during that 60 days, then it will go on to jury trial. If the state applies for petitions for a jury trial, and you think, well, they have petitioned for jury trial, we're going to court, and somewhere down the line we withdraw our petition and the 60 days expires, it does not go to court. That commissioner's report is the amount of the award. Of course, likewise, it works the other way. If you file for jury trial and we don't, and you withdraw your petition, then the commissioner's report becomes the award. With either one of the parties petitioning for jury trial, basically it will go to court, and the amount of the award will be determined in the court by trial by jury. That more or less takes care of the right-of-way acquisition. Now I'd like to go ahead and discuss the relocation assistance program. There are 2 types of assistance that we make available: advisory assistance and relocation assistance payments. Of course, most important to most people is relocation assistance payments. The relocation advisory assistance portion consists of providing individuals, families with listings of replacement housing available, as well as current listing information, interest rates, typical down payments, and all other types of information related to the housing market. Of course, this same type of information is also made available for businesses being displaced. The relocation assistance payments are of two types. You've got supplemental housing payments. They're made available both for owners of residences and for tenants of residences. The other type are moving expense payments, and these basically offset the cost of moving personal property. Concerning the supplemental housing payments, to be eligible for supplemental housing payments, you must be in occupancy of the dwelling that the department is going to acquire for at least 90 days prior to the date the written offer is presented. The supplemental housing payments consist of payments to help defray the cost of increased rental rates and payments to help defray the increased cost of purchasing a replacement dwelling. The amount that you're actually entitled to receive depends on several things: the length of time that you have been in occupancy, your particular housing requirements or needs, the cost of housing available at the time of displacement from your present dwelling, and the actual cost of decent, safe, and sanitary housing that you will actually occupy as the replacement house. In addition to the payments to help defray increased housing costs, there are payments to help defray the cost of moving personal property. For residential moves, we have two types of moves. One is a scheduled move, which is based on the room count in the dwelling, and another is an actual cost move, which is based on the actual cost of moving your personal property. The fixed schedule move does not require any documentation, and of course the actual cost move, well, you have to document all of the expenses. When it comes to moving businesses, again, there are several moving methods available. One is an agent's estimate move, which does not require any documentation. We've got an actual cost move, which does require documentation. There's contract moves and in lieu of payments. Also, now available to businesses are reestablishment expenses. And of course, these are payments in addition to the moving payments that you are reimbursable for, you're eligible to receive reimbursement for when you move or reestablish your business. This will all be fully explained to the relocatee at the time he is being displaced. And of course, I'll be happy to discuss this with you during the intermission. All of these payments are explained in our relocation brochures, and there's a number of them over here on the table. If you'd like to have one, well, please pick one up. If we run out, well, I've got more of them in the car. Our preliminary study shows that, based on alternate number 1, we would have 20 residential relocations, along with 6 commercial relocations. If we go on alternate 2, we'd have 16 residential relocations and 5 commercial relocations. On alternate 2B, we would have 7 residential relocations and 7 commercial relocations. As you can see, all of these alternates are going to require a large number of relocation. And as Selena was saying earlier, there's going to be damage. All we can do is hope to minimize the damage in order to provide a safe facility. On alternate number 3, if we go on the east side, we would have 4 residential relocations and basically 24 commercial businesses that would be relocated. On the west side, we'd have 8 residential relocations with 16 commercial relocations. If we went symmetrical about the existing center line, we'd have 9 residential relocations and we'd relocate 32 commercial businesses. Of course, when we start the relocation, no one will be required to move until adequate replacement housing is made available. In the survey of the area, we determined that we should be able to provide sufficient available housing from existing housing or through process of new construction. No individual family or business will be required to move without at least 90 days prior written notice by the department. If you haven't already picked up one of the brochures, they are available over here on the table. And of course, that brochure contains relocation benefits for residents, tenants, and the commercial business also. All 3 of them are now in one brochure. The relocation assistance program is explained in the brochure. If you have any questions or comments you'd like to make concerning the right-of-way acquisition or relocation assistance programs, you can contact us at the address on the back of the brochure, or you can I would like to at this point make a special point in suggesting that if you are going to be displaced by the project, that you rely heavily on your relocation agent. The relocation agent's job is to assist you in any way possible to ensure that your move is completed as smoothly as possible. Again, I'll be glad to answer any questions of a general nature during the intermission or after the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. As a result of the public meeting we had out here several months ago, there's been a lot of sentiment expressed in letters and such as that we get for staying on the existing alignment. And because of this, the department has spent a great deal of time looking at three different aspects of trying to do this: widening on the left, the right, symmetrically about the existing. And basically our analysis showed that this is probably not going to be feasible to do that. The reason for this is that to effectively increase the capacity over existing US 59 is going to require a 5-lane facility throughout the almost entire extent of the project. Capacity in settings such as those in your downtown part of Stilwell is controlled by how many vehicles you can get through an intersection. Without the left turn storage that would be provided by the 5th turn lane, you wouldn't really greatly increase the capacity over the existing facility. So in answer to some of the questions we had about what a 4-lane facility would do, in essence, no, you wouldn't really increase the capacity of what you have out there presently. A 4-lane facility itself would cut down on the needed amount of right-of-way. To provide 5 lanes would require numerous relocations, as Gary has alluded to, and probably more importantly, would impact a large number of historical structures. I say more importantly, and that's more importantly from a funding standpoint. We're going to build this project, we're going to have to spend federal highway, what we call federal highway funds on this. We simply do not have the adequate state funds to build it all with state money. This means if we're going to build it with federal highway funds, we're going to have to comply with all federal regulations, which includes the Historic Preservation Act, which basically means we could not use federal funds to build on the existing if there is a feasible alternative that is less damaging to the historic properties available. We've already identified at least 2 alternatives that are probably least damaging. And as Gary pointed out, there would be a large number of commercial relocations, and if we did, the remaining businesses would have a lot of disruption during construction itself. Now, from strictly a cost perspective, alternate 2B would be the leading candidate as the preferred alternate. We developed alternate 2B, that was the last alternative we looked at. It was developed late in the process, and when we looked at it, we didn't anticipate acquiring much additional right-of-way. Thus, we weren't too particularly concerned for the impacts to historic properties. We're being asked more and more nowadays to consider secondary impacts to properties. And by secondary impacts, I would mean if the right-of-way went up halfway up into a yard of a building that may be considered historic, and we put the curb line of the street up there, then they have alluded to the fact that we are actually having a secondary impact to that structure. When I had our cultural resources person to take a look at First Street, he has identified several potential structures that may be eligible for addition to the National Register. And they would not have to be physically relocated, but they would have some secondary impacts. In addition, as Kevin said previously, this is outside the little commercial area, and there's primarily residential street, and we would be routing highway traffic down what is now primarily a residential street. For this reason, we may not be able to build on First Street as part of the one-way pair. Consequently, we may really only be looking at 2 alternatives, and that would be alternative 1 and alternative 2 if we're going to be able to build the facility. In just a moment, we're going to have a question and answer period. And I said earlier, you should use this time to get your questions answered about the project, because when we do reconvene the hearing, you will be given an opportunity to present your views for the record. I would encourage you to present your views for the record either in orally tonight or in writing to us. It's now I've got about 10 till 8. We will have a question and answer section. We will reconvene this hearing when all the questions have been answered, or at about 10 minutes till 9 at the latest. And once we have reconvened the hearing and we have comments from all those who would like to comment, we'll be around to talk with you as late as you want to be here talking about the project tonight. With that, we're now into our question and answer session. And the way we'll handle the question and answer session, if you'll ask me the question, either I'll answer it or I'll try to direct it to the person best able to answer that question. Yes, sir.
What's your definition of a historical building?
What's the definition of a historical building? Well, it has to be at least 50 years old to qualify. There's certain aspects of buildings that would qualify for addition to the National Register of Historical Places. Among those would be some historical architectural type or engineering features. It could be a historical something, some person had lived there, some that was historically significant. It could be something such as a lot of your WPA school buildings and things of that nature are considered to be of historic quality because of the period surrounding that time. So I'm not a historic person, but that's basically my understanding of some of the parameters they use to describe or to define historical property. And I would like to also tell you that is not our duty or responsibility to determine what is or what is not historical property. It is our duty to present the information to the State Historic Preservation Office, who makes that decision of whether they are or not eligible.
If some of the buildings that are indicated as being impacted, the historical buildings are just an old building that's about ready to fall down, has been condemned, how does that affect it?
Well, if it's an old building that's about to fall down or has fell down, that probably would affect it. If it's just an old building sitting out there, it could still be historic.
So you couldn't include it according to the federal guidelines, even if it were of no value.
Well, you're talking about a dollar value.
I'm talking about the old school building, for instance.
The old school building, right? Okay, right.
It's been condemned.
Okay. It would probably still be considered eligible. That is the indication that we've had at this time.
What about the railroad depot?
Railroad depot would probably also be considered. As a matter of fact, if you look on the map over there, all those that we have identified to be potentially eligible, and it does not mean that they are eligible, are highlighted in the yellow on the maps we have over there.
I didn't see the depot highlighted.
Okay, well, it was highlighted on this one down.
It should be on alternate one.
It's on all alternates regardless. It should have been highlighted. It's on all the alternates. I say it's on all the alternates. It's on all the alternates except alternate 3 and alternate 2B. It wouldn't be highlighted because of the fact that, you shouldn't be encroaching that far. Even secondary impact shouldn't be getting to there.
You said on coming through 59 highway, there will be 4 residents and 32 businesses. You know where the residents are located?
They said coming along 59 highway, there'll be 4 residences and 32 commercial. We have put some of the preliminary right-of-way lines on these aerials, and those should be identified by the preliminary right-of-way. And I'll explain that on alternate 3. On alternate 3, basically what you see there in black takes up all your existing right-of-way. Those lines we have on there, one shows the right-of-way line holding the east right-of-way line where it is right now and moving to the west. The other one shows holding the west right-of-way line where it is now and moving east. The 2, is it black lines we have on there, Kevin? The 2 black lines would be the new right-of-way that would be required if we went symmetrically. We'd be taking right-of-way from both sides. So that's, without going to the math, that's about the best I can do for you on that. But if you'd like, we can get with you after the meeting and there any other questions?
What would be the anticipated construction time if you went down 59 highway?
What would be Helene, what would be the estimated construction time?
We're looking at 220 days for the bridge and approximately 510 working days for the roadway. Those will go at the same time. You're talking about a year and a half no matter which way we go, approximately.
Did you hear that? She said a year and a half, regardless of which route we went on, probably looking about a year and a half of construction time.
That's how long you was this road been on?
To some extent, yes.
Mr. McCall.
Yes, sir.
My name is Lloyd Cole, I'm the city attorney.
Yes, sir.
I looked some of the figures on it, but I have not been able to determine what financial impact the burden these projects will have on the city.
The financial burden on the city would primarily be for, and then correct me if I'm wrong here, somebody, but I think it'd be primarily for moving of some utilities. Do you have those, Gary?
I went down to the utility branch and got a copy of their estimate for moving utilities.
You want to come up here?
Utilities branches estimate for moving utilities into the alternates is, and of course, basically I'm going to address the city's burden, which the electric company belongs to the city, so they would be moving all electrical utilities. On alternate 1, which would be using existing First Street, it would be, they have estimated $60,280. Front Street, okay. The reason I'm having trouble is because they have these alternates labeled different than what we do on the map over here. So on alternate 2, which would basically be the same as alternate 2 we've got over here, they're looking at the same $60,280 in moving utilities for the electric company. On alternate 3, okay, now this goes down to alternate 3, which would be using the east side. Their responsibility would be about $15,400, and using, well, if you use any one of the 3 alternates of alternate 3, basically the utility cost is the same on those. If we went back to alternate 2A, which would be using First Street, they're not anticipating having to move any electrical at all. Now there is one, I guess, catcher on part of this. With Stilwell being a municipality under 10,000 people, the highway department moves all water lines and sewer lines. Now there are some cases where that I understand some of these utilities will be on private easement. Anytime we move utilities on private easement, the department pays for those. However, it's one of those cases where whatever we pay, the city pays half of that. And of course, then again, you get into federal funding, which most of the time in something like this would be about an 80-20 split, so we would be paying 20% of the total, which would leave the city of Stilwell paying 10% of the total. On most of these alternates, we're talking less than $4,000 or $5,000. So that's not a lot compared to everything else.
On the First Street project at all, you had the substation, proximity to that facility. How will this impact the substation?
In the right-of-way acquisition, we're not planning on buying any right-of-way where the substation's at. We're not going to move it under any of the alternates. That's the one place where they're talking about they're going to be putting up a barrier or retaining wall so as to keep from getting into that.
Yes.
Did I understand you correctly when you say that the federal aid involvement efficiently or effectively rules out the alternate three. If we're going to get federal aid.
I said it, basically what we have to do, if we select alternate three, we have to prove that there is no feasible and prudent alternative that is less damaging to historic properties. And we're going to have some damage to historic properties regardless of which alternative we choose. There's another section, it's called 4F of the Federal Highway Transportation Act, which makes us prepare a 4F study for historical properties. And basically that reads that if there's no, you must prove there's no feasible and prudent alternative. And the way we've interpreted that is that it's less damaging to. So if you have two alternatives and everything else is equal and one is less damaging to historical properties, basically if you're going to spend federal funds, you're going to have to select that one.
From what the number of historical properties you've indicated, that would rule alternate three out.
There's a good possibility. When I made that statement, it's probably because of that reason would probably not be feasible. It's not the only problem with alternate three, but that may be the overriding problem. Yes, ma'am.
What weight does the public's opinion as to the alternative they would prefer have on this decision?
What base was certainly not a popularity contest. We try to, as best we can, accede to the desires of the citizens. However, the desires of the citizens in some instances, for various reasons, and historical or 4F property is just one of them. 4F is a regulation that we deal with on a daily basis, not only on this project, but on projects throughout the state. And this was brought about, 4F was brought about because of the fact that in the olden days, and I say the olden days, back when I first started working for the Department of Transportation, if we wanted to build a highway somewhere, we went simply where there was the lead path of least resistance. And very often this would lead us through parks, recreation areas, and things of this nature. There would be no development there per se, such as homes and things of that nature. There was a case that the federal court, that the Federal Highway Administration was brought into that says, hey, you just basically can't do that anymore. You have to consider the impacts to the recreation property, to parks. And it has developed from there to where I wouldn't say it takes precedence over everything else, but your impacts for other alternatives have to be overwhelming before you can go ahead and actually do a take of parks or recreation property or historic properties. Certainly we do listen to what the citizens of the community want. We do the best we can to satisfy those desires, but like I said, it's not a popularity contest, and I couldn't tell you right now anything other than we will consider the desire of the community, and we have done that. There was an expression when we were down the last time at the public meeting. There was some expression of the sentiment for the existing, and we went at that time. We didn't think it was feasible simply because of the number of relocations that we were going to have, and we went back and tried to look at some other alternatives to lessen those relocations. But it appears if all things are equal, then we're going to have to choose the one that has this less damaging. If everything else is equal, we'd have to choose the one that's less damaging to historic properties. Like I said, either that or just not build a project simply because we don't have the funds. If we don't use our federal highway funds and federal highway dollars for that. Yes, sir.
When the state buys the commercial property, do they buy all of it, or just they buy just the exact amount that they need to build the right-of-way on and leave the rest of the land there?
It
Leave
depends.
you stuck with it.
It depends on whether the amounts of property that they're going to have to buy would basically render the rest of the property unusable. They would buy the entire thing. Is that a fair? Yes, sir. It's just a little motel set right down here? Yes.
They take any of it, for instance. I couldn't operate a business. I'm just so small now.
again, if they took enough of it so you couldn't operate a business, I'd say they'd take the whole thing. Is that right?
More than likely, it's close to sitting at the street, the office, and stuff there, number of units per day. It would probably not be feasible to operate that business any longer. We'd probably have to acquire that back.
Yeah, but that's, we can't tell you yes or no tonight because that would come along in the appraisal process. But if you didn't hear that, he said probably in this instance, knowing where the high post sits the highway, that more than likely they would have to purchase the entire thing.
When it comes to making a determination, historical sites, is that an administrative hearing? Or is the owner or others who are otherwise interested in that determination have access to that decision?
Do they have it?
And input?
I would say no. I can't answer that quite truthfully because, like I said, the State Historic Preservation Office is the one that does that. And I think the answer to that is no. That basically if a property is historic, it has some historic value, then it is historic. Doesn't mean that as an owner you can't go do something else with it. It just means that if there's going to be federal funds involved, then you're going to have to comply with that Historic Preservation Act. Follow what I'm saying?
Then what you're saying, that's an arbitrary decision on the agency?
Well, it's not arbitrary decision. It's completely on the part of that agency. They do coordinate with something they call the Advisory Council on Historic Properties on that. If there's some question that whether a property may or may not be eligible, you can take it, basically, you can take it to what they call the keeper of the National Register. He will make that determination. It's normally, and this is just my experience in dealing with it over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years, if our State Historic Preservation Office, which is the office that's responsible for historic properties in Oklahoma, if they make a determination that property is eligible, then it's eligible. And it does not have to be on the record. It does not have to be on the National Register. Pardon me, not the record, the National Register. It just has to be eligible for addition to the National Register. And that came about because of the fact that, I guess, when the Historic Preservation Act was first implemented, then if it wasn't on the register, then, you didn't have to consider it. But there were so many that were in the process of being documented to be added to the Federal Register, or to the National Register, that some of these were being destroyed for various reasons during that period. And they have changed the regulations such that it is considered eligible for addition to the historic records. It receives the same protection if it is on the National Register. Yes, sir.
Well, come down to 59, would be equal amount taken off on both sides?
Question was, if it does come down 59, will we take equal amounts off of both sides, or will we take all of it off one side? More than likely, we'll take it all off of one side. That would be the least number of relocations. And we just have to look at it. We have not made that determination at this time. If we do go down 59, which side we would go on. We've looked at all 3 of them. More than likely, we would go to one side or the other and not go symmetrical. Is that a fair statement, Elaine, Gary? I guess this gentleman right here.
Has there, we've talked about the historical impact and all that. Has there been any type of study done as far as what the impact would be on the city of Stilwell, like on sales tax revenue and that sort of thing?
No. And that's a tough question to answer. We get asked that question more often when we're talking about completely bypassing a town. Is what impact is that going to have on our sales tax revenue? And unfortunately, we don't have a good answer for that. We don't have any studies, any real scientific studies that's ever been done, that I'm aware of, that has taken a look at this. We have asked our Transportation Research Board, which is a national organization that does research for the various transportation departments around the country, to do a study on that. And we have contacted numerous other states to see if anybody's done a study on it. We have found nobody that's come up up with a good answer to that question. You ask some towns, and they will tell you, well, you know, when they first, and I'm talking about strictly bypasses now, when we first put in the bypass, our sales tax dropped off, but then it came back up and either went higher or leveled off at about what it was. Other towns will tell you, well, you know, it started going down and it went hit the bottom and then it leveled off. And so I guess it probably depends on the situation. That's about the best answer I can give you on that. This gentleman back here?
The Section 106 National Historic Preservation Act, mean anything to it?
Yes, it does.
What might that entail?
Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act basically is the protection features of the Historic Preservation Act. Basically, it tells you, Section 106 basically tells you the procedures you go through.
Take historic property.
Right.
So you can take historic properties if you follow Section 106.
You can take historic properties if you follow Section 106, but you also have to follow Section 4F of the Transportation Act, which says you cannot take historic properties if there's a feasible and prudent alternative.
So it's not the Historic Society or Preservation Act that's stopping it, it's the highway department.
Well, now I'm not saying that because I don't know that, you know, the two are tied together. If you're going to spend federal funds, then you're going to have to do the 106 process. And the 106 process, basically, you're also looking at what your alternatives might be there. But you can take it out. There are certain things that you can do. You have to go through and document. You document all the history you can about it. In some cases, you see if you can move it. And a good example would be the historical structure down here, the bridge, which is considered a historical structure. If you could physically relocate that bridge into another setting where it retained its historical significance, then you could do that. That is the 106 process, and that's part separate from the 4F process.
You can take historic properties.
Yes, yes, that's what I'm saying. We are going to impact and take some historic properties regardless of which one of these we go through. But then we go back over to the other side, which is 4F, which says you'll choose the least damaging alternative. Yes, sir.
In the report, you listed 16 historic sites on alternate 3 widening to the east. Or do you have
We
that?
listed 16 structures, but if you look on the right-hand column, it shows which alternate it will impact, be
Okay.
impacted.
I thought he said 4 residences and 16.
That was the physical relocation.
Number of physical relocations that would be involved.
Those relocations that were mentioned by Gary, not all of those were historic. There were
How many historic are affected
Well,
by
I
the
said that during my statement when the tape was on. There's 3 for alternate 1, the one that goes along Front Street.
Okay.
That would consist of bridge, which affects all the alternates. There is a late Tudor house that we have enough information to determine if it's historic or not, but we haven't considered it though. So that's 2 of them. Then the rail depot, that's 3. Now alternate 2, which is the one-way paragraph on Front Street and US 59, they're the same structures. But we would not physically take it from alternate 2 because we stay within existing right-of-way, but we have secondary impact. Because you're putting a highway traffic in front of a historic property, and we have to look more into that. But alternate 1, as far as a railroad depot, we possibly have to take it. But we're going to try to avoid it.
What about alternate 3? What historic
All right.
structures are you?
Now we're talking a lot more structures.
That's
And
not
I said for alternate 3, if we go east line, which is the yellow tape, we shift the pavement 16 feet from the existing center line, we will be taking 6 structures that are historic.
Can you identify those?
They're in yellow. I highlighted them in yellow.
Okay.
I can't name them off the top of my head right now. It's like get the EA out. It's all explained in the environmental assessment. It's broken down by structure and which alternate is going to impact that structure. All right, there's going to be 9 on the west
question the historic is because that seems to be the main contention, the main problem with alternate three.
Well, alternate three is the sheer number of relocations too. We've got to consider that overall as far as environmental impact.
Yeah,
We have 41 symmetrically, 41 relocations, but out of that 41, 11 are historic.
Okay, the historic is what affects the federal aid, right?
Right,
Not
right.
not the sheer number, but the historic.
Well, the sheer number does too. See, we're also looking at other impacts. We're not just looking at historical. But I was using that as to say, probably simply from a historical basis. We would also have to look at the numbers of relocations. We'd have to look at the dollars we're talking about. We'd have to look at the impacts during construction. We'd have to look at all the different noise, water, air, the social impacts.
Does the transportation department have an opinion? And if so, what I'm seeing is that the opinion is they do not want alternate three.
Well, I don't have an opinion one way or another. I don't.
Based on what we're hearing in the audience is that alternate three is not the best solution.
Okay, well, what we're saying is that the things that we have, from everything that we have to consider, and probably it's going to be highly improbable that we can choose alternate three, because we have these other alternatives that are available. They do, in fact, have less impacts, not only on historic properties, but also on relocations and the other things that we do consider. But I'm not sitting up here saying we favor any one over the other. If everything was equal, basically what we would hear tonight at this public hearing would determine probably which alternative we would choose. But what I was trying to point out is that all things are probably not equal. That we do have these other impacts, we are aware of them, and we regardless of whether we wanted to or not. Now, from strictly a highway department perspective, knowing that we've got about 500 jobs on our construction program and our funds are very limited, we would probably look very hard at alternate 2B. Reason being is that it's by far the least expensive. But we're faced with the same situation there that we were talking about on alternate 3, which is our impacts to historical structures for one thing. The other is the impacts of running highway traffic down through parts of what is residential in the area right now. So, it's whether we have a preferred alternative, we don't right now. We're gonna take all the input we receive tonight, plus all the input we get in writing. We'll take that back and look at it, and then we'll choose a preferred alternative. Once we do that, we will revise this environmental assessment to state that, and we will consult with the Federal Highway Administration and ask them for a finding of no significant impacts. And if they do give us that, then that will be the alternative that we will build. It's not, we try to do the best we can to implement the desires of the citizens. The very first thing we do, we look and see what can we possibly do. Then we receive the input from the citizens as what they may want. We try to present them with all the information we have at the time, and that's what we're trying to do tonight. And I don't think we favor any alternative over any other one, other than from strictly a dollar viewpoint. We'd probably look at alternate 2B, but we may not be able to do that either because of the other things other than the dollar value. This gets back to what I said previously about in the olden days, we built highways where we wanted to, and we simply cannot do that anymore, whether we want to or not. We'll build them where we want to as long as we can satisfy everything else that we have to satisfy, but there are numerous regulations that we have to satisfy. I think at one time I counted 69 different federal rules and regulations that we have to comply with to spend federal funds on a project, and that's on any project that we do, not only this one, but any project. I'm going to take this gentleman in the back here. He hasn't had that question answered yet.
Normally, you build a highway, 4-lane highway. Do you normally come right through a town, or do you bypass that town?
Yes, if normally if we're going to build a 4-lane highway, do we come right through town or we do bypass town? It really depends. What we have to do is a feasibility study to determine if we're going to have enough bypassable traffic that's actually totally bypassing the town to say that a bypass is feasible. That's part one. Part two, if there is enough traffic, what about the traffic that remains? What are you going to need to take care of it? And in this instance, we took a look at a possible bypass. We didn't have enough bypassable traffic to justify building a bypass simply for bypass purposes. Not only that, but with the traffic that would be remaining, we would still have to implement similar type improvements in order to handle the remaining traffic. That's on our best estimates of what traffic is going to be in 20 years.
How many ghost towns have you created by making bypasses around the town instead of going through the town?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if we created any. I can't answer that question. Yes, ma'am.
What is the anticipated date that you will have to decide on one of these plans?
I would say, normally I'd say in about 2 months. For this, I'll say probably closer to 3 to 4 months.
Okay, and then will it be made public like in our newspaper?
Once we've made the selection, we can do that. Once we made our selection of the preferred alternative, and if the Federal Highway Administration agrees with that, we can make it public.
Okay, after that time, will the public have any way that they can let their wishes be known, like if they don't really want it?
Tonight's your opportunity to do that.
So tonight's our opportunity, and then we have to take whatever you decide.
Tonight's your opportunity. We'll make the decision, and once that decision is made, basically we're going to stay with that decision. And this is, these are the alternatives that we're looking at. So you should take that in consideration when you make your comments. Yes, sir.
For ease of traffic flow through town, alternate 2A or 2B, either one, will have wide intersections at the north and south end of town. Is that right? You wouldn't have to stop and make a left turn or a right turn to get over to the present highway route through town. On alternate one, if you're coming through town and wanted to get over to where Highway 59 currently is, you'd have to turn off and go a couple blocks over.
The reason for that is you don't have the conflicting traffic. Is that correct? So you can make your transitions through kind of what we call a Y intersection. You can't do that if you get conflicting traffic. And that you're correct on that sense. Yes, sir.
About how long do you think it would be for the homeowner to have to?
Well, as I said, this project is not targeted to be let to contract until November 1994. Normally, we try to get through all this process, get our right-of-way plans and everything prepared at least a year out in front of when we're going to let the project contract. So I would say you probably wouldn't be hearing anything before, at the very earliest, probably October of '93. That'd be the earliest, and could be up to January, February, March '94, maybe even a little later. That's based on a present schedule that we have for this. If it remains on that date. This gentleman in green back here.
What scenario would you choose option
Under what scenario would we simply cannot ignore the problems that exist. We'd be negligent in our duty if we didn't. I guess if we would take a look if the overall sentiment is we don't want to do anything, we would certainly consider that. But by the same token, we're talking tonight primarily to the citizens of Stilwell. You do have other travelers that travel through here, which we also have to consider their safety. And basically, because of the accident rate out here right now, it is not a safe situation. And we're going to do the best we can to address that situation. Yes, sir.
When you consider you keep talking about the number of businesses that would have to be relocated if you went on alternate 3. If you went with alternate 1, a lot of businesses depend upon traffic how do you consider how many businesses might have to be relocated with no help from the state because of that?
This goes back to this question that was asked me a while ago about what bypasses does, and then I can't answer that question.
But how do you consider that in your decision?
Well, basically, we know there's going to be some of it done, but normally, traffic, if it's not a highway-oriented business, then normally your local traffic's probably going to still patronize those businesses which they have established a business relationship with. And that's very hard to put a finger on. And I understand what you're saying, and I really don't have a good answer for you. We consider it, but the way that would be in consideration is if there was a determining factor of one over the other. And then, I mean, two were equal, one had that, one didn't, we would probably choose one that didn't have that effect to them. No, that doesn't answer your question, but that's about the best answer I can give you.
Can I add something to it? On the lines of that traffic though, Wayne, you can help me on this too, but we've done that study of just the raw number of vehicles going through Stilwell. And we can't tie down how many of those vehicles are stopping at the Circle K or Charlie's Chicken or whatever. But we do know that if we put a bypass, that traffic's still going to be there. And you're going to still have a bad facility. So we've looked at the study, if we put a east bypass, we had only 3,000 vehicles that were going to utilize that bypass on a daily average. And then you still had around 8,000 vehicles in Stilwell. And this is all purely traffic. I'm not a traffic engineer at all, but they've done all they considered that if we put the facility here, what happens to the traffic in Stilwell? If it was built tomorrow, snap of the finger, what would happen? And they still had a lot of traffic in Stilwell. So the improvements are still warranted in Stilwell.
I don't think that's the question he asked.
Well, he just wanted to know the dollar amount of if we go with alternate one.
Right.
What I'm concerned with
What I'm saying is that we can't put a dollar amount on it, but we can put traffic there. We know what the traffic
Well,
behavior is going to be.
basically, what Kevin's trying to say is most of the traffic is oriented into and out of Stilwell rather than going straight through. That traffic is still going to be oriented into and out of Stilwell. It's just going to come in and go out a little different way. I think is that what you're trying to say? Okay.
The point I wanted to make was, though, you spend money to be on the highway where the traffic is. So now we're going to move the highway. Otherwise, we'd all build a block off. It's cheaper.
Okay.
So how many businesses are going to have to relocate to try to get where the traffic is?
I understood that was your question, and that was the answer that I gave you previously. I really cannot say. You know, I understood what you said.
Larry, do you all have an idea of what the mix is on our traffic, like through traffic versus local traffic out of that 16,000?
We really don't know for sure what it is. We have some estimates. Can I have a look, Kevin? Okay, the traffic study that we did for the bypass itself indicated there would be about 3,300 vehicles per day completely bypassing Stilwell. There would still remain about 7,400 vehicles per day in primarily downtown Stilwell. Future traffic, 2012 is the year that we projected this for. There would be 5,500 vehicles per day that would be, I say bypassing, they would be using the bypass, and for all intents and purposes bypassing town. You would still have approximately 13,590 in the downtown area. So that's what I said, we could not, we can't build both. You're still going to have your traffic in Stilwell. So we chose not to build a bypass in this instance. Sometimes.
That's been a major concern of a lot of us here in town, is that even with this road up along paralleling the railroad track, we're still going to have considerable traffic problem there on 2nd Street or the existing 59.
Well, basically what you're going to do is you're going to move some of that, you're going to distribute a large part of that traffic down to Front Street. It will still be available for circulation into, if we still be available for circulation into and along 2nd Street, but you're going to move a large portion of that traffic down to Front Street.
But are we just going to fund it back over whenever they come down our side streets and everything to get the businesses?
Basically, you are, and you're going to funnel some of it over. But you're not going to have that great amount because this, what's using 2nd Street right now, it basically is going to all parts of Stilwell. That traffic that's going to all parts of Stilwell could use Front Street and then distribute itself on your side streets into the different parts of Stilwell, not necessarily getting onto 2nd Street. If it desired to go someplace on 2nd Street, of course, that option is available to them. But there's going to be a large amount of traffic still within this 3-block area, and it's going to be distributed a little bit. We did not do basically, I don't think we got traffic where we looked at the traffic on Front Street and the traffic that would be remaining on 2nd Street. We have not done that.
It just looked from those figures that you had, the 3,300 that would use a bypass, it does really look like through traffic is our problem here.
Through traffic is not specific, basically, through traffic is because we have determined that it adds to the problem. But it's not such that if we built a bypass, we could solve your problems in downtown Stilwell. There's a gentleman back here.
The state already made its
No.
final
Answer to that question is no, we don't know. We don't. If we had made up our minds, and we could get changed, of course, and that's happened in a time or two, too. But no, to answer your question, I'll tell you straight out, the answer to that question is no. Yes, sir.
Seeing that all in one, we're all pushing here, actually, they're giving us the worst, they both were, you say you're not giving us the bypass, this all in one has the same effect. You have a railroad on one side, there's be no business and commercial activity that's located there, and limited access to that. Actually, you're giving us the bypass. We don't need a bypass.
Are there any other questions? I mean, I can't respond, but he made a response. I can't answer a response. Maybe I should say, are there any other responses? I mean, any other comments?
Alcohol's got bypasses all the way around it, hasn't heard it.
Ma'am? Sir?
Alcohol has bypasses all around it, hasn't heard it.
Yeah. Well, you know, here's one example of a town, a community that might tell you, yeah, the bypass helps. You know, you go to another community and they may tell you, well, it hurts. So that, like I said, it is, that's a difficult question, and I wish I had an answer to bypass and things that simply don't. We don't have any, like I said, we don't have anything other than intuition to base it on, and we don't have any big facts and figures to back up anything I might say other than, I don't know, last month we were down in Poco, and the Poco newspaper had done quite an extensive study of the different communities around the state that had bypasses, and their conclusions were exactly the same ones that we have reached. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it hurts, sometimes it's neutral.
Well, I live on 2nd Street, 42 years, and you can't hardly get across the street now with the traffic. And if it was 4 or 5 lanes, you never would get across it. That would kill.
Okay. Again, that's a comment. I can't respond to that. This gentleman back here.
All of the existing streets, are they tied into the new 4-lane?
Yes, all the existing, on all, when you're talking about the Front Street alignment, yes, the streets that are there now will tie into it. All driveways that are presently tie into it. Any new driveways that are proposed would be governed by our normal driveway procedures, which you'd have to go through your division for.
Well, the part where it's raised up, I don't guess it'll be acceptable.
Would you repeat the question, please?
Part of this highway is usually raised up to help us begin.
On the south end, I think only, isn't that correct? Basically, for all intents and purposes, the south end to get across the bridge would be the only grade change in elevation on it. Is that correct, William?
There are existing roadways that connect on the south end now. Those will still connect even when we do change the grade on the south end. The businesses that do connect, that will be basically building our roadway over, they will be relocated.
Does your grade change basically start at Plum Street? From there north, is it basically the same?
Somewhere along that lines, about where you see State Highway 100 going west, that is about the point where it goes back to existing grades. There'll be some grade changes, but basically the same from 100 west north.
It's quite a bit,
On all.
quite a distance from 100 west to Plum Street.
There's some changes through there. If we move the alignment, naturally, we move where our dirt is. The existing businesses that are there, if we have to move the actual roadway, even though the elevations are basically the same where the roadway is, that's not where the ground line is now.
Right, but my question was the grade of the existing highway from 100 to Plum Street. Is that basically the grade you're going to be using on the new one?
Fairly close, yes. The only difference would be actually getting over the railroad.
If it goes down this first in here, there'll be every block, there'll be a place to get off, Mr. Valley.
If you go down First Street, well, where you have
Front Street.
Front Street, okay, if you go down Front Street, well, whatever street you have connecting it now, you will be
Still
connecting in the future,
Yeah.
right?
That's good.
In all alternatives, all plans, existing surface streets will
Yeah.
connect.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How will 100 west connect to Appearence? I know that the map shows, but I can't see. Is it going to go all on across? You're going to extend it?
Going to extend it on down to tie into the new facility that we built. Are there any other questions? I'll tell you what I'd like to do. I'd like to reconvene the hearing, and because we have some people that probably like to make comments and get on out of here. Why don't we reconvene the hearing and give them an opportunity to do that? Then they can either stay or leave, whatever their desires may be. With that in mind, I'm going to reconvene the hearing, and this hearing is reconvened. We had an intermission of about 45 minutes. No, we weren't able to answer all your questions to your satisfaction. We did try to answer them as best we could. Now is your opportunity to comment on the proposed project. Remember, the reason for this hearing is to receive your input, consideration before we do select a preferred alternative. We would ask that you limit your comments to 5 minutes. If 5 minutes are not enough, then you may finish your comments in writing to the Planning Director of Oklahoma Department of Transportation as previously described. We would also ask that you confine your comments to these specific alternatives we talked about tonight. If you've got questions or comments about another project in the area, we'd be more than happy to discuss those with you, but after the comment period. As I said previously, this basically is not a vote, it's not a debate, and we know we're interested in everybody's opinion, and we would ask that you respect their opinion, even if it differs from yours. And also, as I stated previously, the selection of the preferred alternate is not a popularity contest per se. And with all the things that we have to consider on this, we will consider if you simply say, I don't like such and such alternate, but it will not carry as much weight as it will if you specifically state your reasons why you do not like that alternative, or the reasons why you do like a specific alternative. When you approach the microphone, to ask that you please state your name for the record. And if you would, please come around to this side. We've got wire thing up here, and I wouldn't want to trip anybody over all the wire. We do ask that you come here to the lectern because we have our tape recorder hooked directly into the lectern. Normally, our procedure is to let any elected officials who would like to make a statement to do so first. If there are any elected officials, we would be happy to hear from you. If not, we will just open it up to anybody in the audience that would like to make a comment. And anybody want to lead off? All right.
be first because I have a grandson who's playing in the Little League, and I'd like to go see the last of his game, if you don't mind my being first. I'm Wilma Mankiller, Chief of the Cherokee Nation, and though I live in Adair County and trade in Stilwell, I work in 14 counties and many small communities like Stilwell that are very, very similar to Stilwell. And I can tell you there are dozens and dozens and dozens of communities throughout eastern Oklahoma who would like to have the problem that we have here in Stilwell tonight. There are many, many people take the long view and see that doing a 4-lane road will cause the future of their towns to be preserved and create employment for their children and that sort of thing. I'd like to thank the people from the Department of Transportation for coming here tonight. We are right now involved in about $27 million worth of construction, and I frequently have to be in their position in trying to determine where a site will be located. We just built a clinic in Salisaw. Our plan to build a $7 million clinic here in Adair County and are a significant employer in Adair County now. And so this is an issue we're very, very concerned about. As someone who loves this county and lives in this county, I think that I'm very pleased that this bypass issue is being discussed, or this highway is being discussed. I guess my personal, if I have a preference, and I didn't come here tonight thinking that we were going to be faced with this, it would be to try to preserve as much of the historic nature of this town as we can. I think Stilwell has a wonderful, rich heritage and history, and I'd like to see us preserve some of that. All of us in this room, we're not going to be here forever, but I think that if we can preserve some of these things for our children and grandchildren, they sure will appreciate it. I certainly appreciate the things that my ancestors have preserved for me in this county. We're concerned right now about the traffic here. The clinic we're going to build is a $7 million clinic, which is going to employ 80 to 100 people. We already employ 225 people out here on the other side of town. We have an industrial park out here that employs 80 people, and we hope to employ more in the future. We need a 4-lane highway here in Adair County. And in looking at this whole issue, it's very emotional. And I don't blame any of you for being emotional about it, because it affects our lives, and it's going to disrupt all of our lives. Anybody who comes through town, it will affect our lives. But I really hope that what we'll do ultimately is leave it to the experts to decide. When I have to build a clinic somewhere and the Indian Health Service tells me you can't build in that because that's a floodplain, or you can't build there because of this reason, that sort of thing, I don't like it. I wanted desperately to build our new clinic by the Stilwell Hospital, and I tried every way I could. I begged, I pleaded, I had meetings, I went to Washington, and it came down to whether we wanted a clinic in Stilwell or whether it was going to have to be built where the experts felt it should be built. And so we decided to build it where the experts said it should be built. And so I just wanted to make that comment. I talked with various people in Adair County who are concerned about it. We have a lot of traffic coming through here. We want to expand and continue to grow in Adair County. And I try to take the long view when I make decisions, and change is difficult. It's hard for all of us to deal with change. But if there's a way we can do this in a positive way, I think it'll ensure the future for our county, and certainly for the city of Stilwell. So, and I wish, as he said, when we were trying to do the clinic in Salisaw, people became so divided and lobbied people and threatened people and that sort of thing. It was totally unnecessary. We all come here tonight from different life perspectives and different viewpoints, and let's respect each other's different viewpoints. And I look at this both as someone who lives here and loves this county and loves this town, but also I look at it as someone who runs an organization that employs almost 2,000 people in eastern Oklahoma. And I see, this project probably a little bit differently than maybe somebody else does, but I certainly respect your opinion to have a different opinion. One point I wanted to make, our offices in Cherokee County There was a very similar meeting to this when the Bertha Parker bypass was proposed in Cherokee County. And it actually really does bypass. It's not something that moves over two roads. And it has had virtually no impact, negative impact at all at any point. And in fact, Tahlequah has grown dramatically. It has had no impact on downtown at all. What's had more of an impact on downtown actually is the little malls and with places that can offer large volumes of merchandise at a much lower price. That's had a much greater impact on downtown than the bypass. So, in other towns, I'm sure it's impacted them. So it sort of just depends on the town. And so I'd like to see us treasure and maybe even use as tourist ideas our historic sites in Adair County rather than just getting rid of them. So that's my comments, and I wish you well and look forward to your doing this, and would again like to thank you for coming here and doing this. I've had to do this myself before. Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you make your ball game. Who would like to be next? Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment for the record? If not, I will again remind you that if you'd like to.
Hello, I'm Brian Bigby. I'm here representing the Bigby Company. Definitely don't want to step on any toes, but we have more than $1 million invested in the present 59 highway, and we would kind of like to see it remain where it is or even be improved. So, thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to make a comment? Okay, I will again remind you that if you still want to make a comment and you would prefer not come up here and do it, you're still welcome to pick up one of our pre-addressed envelopes or get the address off the wall, send those comments to us. I would remind you that those comments must be received, in order to be considered, must be received no later than August the 3rd, 1992 at the Office of the Planning Director. We'll normally add a couple of days to that, but that is our official cutoff date for reception of comments. If there are no other comments, then this public hearing is adjourned. I've got 8:50. We will be here the remainder, well, not the remainder of the night, we'll be here to discuss or talk with you as long as you would like to be here.
I'll make 3 times as much money as I make now.
Especially if you just had a good inside source where you can take advantage of that.
Well, yes and no. Let's say some guy comes along here and he buys 8 pieces of property on this road. Okay, the appraiser goes down, he goes to the courthouse, he gets comparable sales, he calls the seller, he calls the buyer, he says, you sell that for what? Guy says, okay, I sold these all for $5,000 a lot. Well, the guy paid $5,000 a lot for them, 8 comparable sales.
Well, yeah, it's current market.
What's the appraised value? What is a willing buyer willing to pay a willing seller for that lot, $5,000? So what does that lot bring? The guy took it, bought it, out of his money, he just got a loan, he paid interest on it, he sold it for the same thing he bought it for.
But with a good inside source with additional lead time, then you can jockey them back and sell them to a buddy for $10,000 and increase the
Now, if you get back down here, you bought
the local community channel.
Land speculation along highway projects is not a problem. It's not a good place to invest money. You have a card with you, Gary?
That's the reason I asked you that. That's supposed to be the 5 lanes right here. What about these stuff? I can make it better. Like them.
That's one of the intents of this. Other is the
It is one of the intentions.
Well, we wanted to have a people, I wanted to go here and they just, well, I'll just take the road short. They don't. No, yours, I think it'll happen a lot.
I'm gonna tell you the biggest fallacy is, or is it gonna be that open where you can just dart across the car to 3 lanes of traffic, whatever, where you want? That's not
Except you measure, these particular streets are probably similar. Particularly this one, this one.
We slapped it
In division. Possibly, folks to more likely, this is how we have traffic.
What they can say is,
We have to study this.
we don't agree.
Counties and cities.
Based on the growth in this area over the past.
What happens is, every morning, everybody goes here, 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 and there. I mean, you got, what do you say, Hudson,
That's the sale barn. Tyson's right here.
Tyson, you got Tyson, you got Cherokee, you got the Votech.
It's Saturday morning, early Saturday morning. The sun won't be fully up for another 30 minutes. However, this typical suburban delivery office is about to become a very busy place. Throughout the night and into the early morning, postal workers have been busy sorting and distributing hundreds of millions of letters, invoices, circulars, catalogs, greeting cards, magazines, and packages. Mail from real estate agents, local merchants, major retailers, charitable organizations, community service groups, universities, well, you name it. And of course, it's happening everywhere, all across the nation, in tens of thousands of post offices, big and small. 500 million pieces of mail every day. Mail moving from and to more than 115 million homes and businesses, spread across 3.5 million square miles. It's hard to visualize all the tire tread and shoe leather that this great enterprise requires. But look down any highway, road or avenue in any city, town, community, or neighborhood, and we'll be there. Every home, every business, every day. Hey, that looks good, honey.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, hi. I'm John Harper. I'm an employee of the United States Postal Service and one of its 240 million customers. You know, when Congress chartered the United States Postal Service, it didn't think small. Maintain universal and uniform service, it said. Charge a fair price. And price it in a way that's fair to all. Oh, hi, good morning, Dan.
Good morning, John. It's a beautiful Saturday morning, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, just great.
By the way, is your dog Max out of the hospital yet?
Yeah, we sprung him yesterday.
That's good stuff. You know, chasing cars isn't healthy.
Hey, you know, Max has been dreaming about chasing cars his whole life. He just never caught one before, did you, boy? Say, how did you get out of the backyard? Vicky's not gonna like that. Oh, Max. Anyway, I've been working for the Postal Service for, well, almost 25 years now. And, you know, this simple thing that we call a mailbox still amazes me. A mailbox is about as low-tech a device as you can find. Yet, for all its simplicity, it is a channel into and through one of the most amazing communication and distribution networks in the world. It's a network of people and equipment, facilities, vehicles, that's so much a part of our lives that, well, nearly all of us just take it for granted. That's probably the way it should be. Okay, Max, let's go inside. Come on, boy. Come on, boy. Atta boy. Ah, what a nice day. All right, Max, let's sit right here for a little bit. Atta boy. Okay. No, Max, not for you. You know, some of us are already familiar with some of these issues. For example, the fact that the Postal Service no longer runs on tax money. That's right. Mailers, not taxpayers, pay the full freight for postal operations. However, misunderstandings still persist about how mailers pay, and particularly about a class of mail that pays its own way and contributes substantial amounts toward the fixed costs of the Postal Service. I guess the best way to illustrate that would be this newspaper. Oh, good boy, Max. All right, thank you, Max. Oh, it's all wet, Max. You drooled on it again. Anyway, this is a newspaper, and this is advertising. No surprises. No one expects one without the other. And everybody knows that this would be a lot more expensive if it weren't for this. The same is true for magazines, and television, radio. It's also true about the mail. You see, by creating a wider, broader revenue base, well, this advertising mail helps to lighten the load. In other words, this first-class mail can cost less because of this mail. Let me illustrate. Now, today I received a total of 8 pieces of mail. Here's a magazine, our church bulletin, blank checks from our bank, something from the American Cancer Society. Oh, an invitation to our family reunion. Yeah, and I've been expecting this. And a bill from our veterinarian. Oh, boy. Yeah. Oh. An enormous bill from the veterinarian. Oh, Max. Anyway, I received 8 pieces of mail today. Now, it took my letter carrier, Dan, about a minute to walk from my neighbor's house over here, select the mail addressed to me, and make the delivery. Keeping in mind that time is money, imagine what it would mean if I'd received only 1 piece of mail today. It still would have taken Dan about the same amount of time to walk from my neighbor's house, select the mail belonging to me, and make the delivery. However, the cost of that time would now have to be absorbed by the revenue from 1 piece of mail and not 8. But whoa there, you see. Postage for advertising mail doesn't cost as much as postage for first-class mail, right? And in fact, in some cases, it can cost substantially less. So if it costs less, how can it be carrying its fair share of the load? Well, the answer lies in how advertising mail is prepared and presented to the Postal Service by the mailer. Here, let me illustrate. Let's compare the handling that this circular required to the handling required by this invitation to my family reunion. After my aunt addressed and stamped her invitations, she probably dropped them in a street collection box near her home. Fine. For her, that was the end of the process. But for the Postal Service, it was just the beginning. My invitation had to be collected, then trucked to an area mail processing facility, where it was culled, canceled, and prepared for sorting. From there, it traveled to an optical character reader, which, because the envelope was handwritten and not machine readable, passed it on to a letter sorting machine, where a clerk read the zip code and directed it to the city of delivery. Later, in the wee hours of the morning, it was sorted again, this time to the actual delivery route. And finally, it was consolidated with other mail and trucked to the post office of delivery, where it was distributed, sequenced, pulled down, and delivered. And all for the price of 1 first-class stamp. And that was the handling on a letter mailed locally and delivered locally. Consider what's involved when a piece goes from coast to coast. So if it takes all that work to sort and deliver this, well then how can this, which was delivered by the same letter carrier on the same day at the same time, pay its own way when it costs less to mail than my aunt's invitation? Well, it's as simple as this. By pre-sorting their mail and by presenting it to the Postal Service according to certain guidelines, the customer eliminated a lot of the work that the Postal Service would normally have to absorb. For the Postal Service, there was nothing to collect, cull, cancel, sort, or resort. And at the office of delivery, there was nothing that the letter carrier had to do to prepare the mail except merge it with other mail of similar size. So, you see, advertising mail costs less because it costs less to handle. Anyway, the point is, all advertising mail contributes a percentage above and beyond its handling costs. See, every year, the revenues from advertising mail contribute well over $1 billion toward the cost of purchasing, constructing, and maintaining the vast network of buildings and vehicles, machines that we need to keep the mail moving. And because that money comes from advertising mail, well, that means that those costs don't have to show up in the price that you and I pay for a sheet of stamps.
Honey, I've got to get going. When the mailman bring us?
Oh, there's some sales over at the mall, and your real estate magazine came in.
Great.
And we got the invitation we've been expecting to the family reunion.
Good. I'll look at the mail later.
Okay.
Honey?
Yeah?
Be nice to Max today. Yes, Max. And when you feed him, be sure and warm his food. You know that he doesn't like it cold, okay? Bye.
Bye.
And keep Max in the backyard. Bye.
Max, what have you been telling her? Blabbermouth? Well, anyway, you know what Vicki said just now? I'll look at the mail later. You know, it makes me think about the first of 3 people or groups of people that I'd like you to consider the next time that you reach into your mailbox. First, think about yourself. Advertising mail, while helping to hold down the price of postage, is among the least intrusive forms of advertising that you can find. You can look at it now or later or never. Second, think about the local merchants, professionals, small businesses in your community. A local merchant or professional will often find that television, radio, newspapers cast far too wide a net and are priced out of reach. Without direct mail, they simply couldn't get the word out about their products or services. And third, think about the nation's charities. You see, hundreds, possibly thousands of public service organizations, big and small, depend heavily on direct mail to raise the funds that support a long list of worthy causes. Well, that's quite a bit to chew on. Oh, I'm speaking metaphorically, Max. Yeah, metaphor, M-E, look, Max, look it up, will you? Listen, I gotta go, it's feeding time, but please remember these few points, if you will. Advertising mail pays its own way, and it contributes more than $1 billion a year toward the fixed costs of the Postal Service. It helps to hold down the costs of other classes of mail, and it requires less postage because it requires less handling. And also, it can help keep a guy out of the doghouse sometimes. I'm going to call Vicki and spring for lunch today, since I have this 2-for-1 lunch coupon at that nice place near our office. Yeah, what do you think about that, Max? He thinks that's great, and it... Yeah, can we eat now? Well, of course we can eat now. All right, Max, come on, boy, let's go inside. Come on. Attaboy. Okay, inside. Okay, Max. Oh, Max, come on, what do you mean? That's not what Lassie eats. Well, what if the can's been in the refrigerator? Look, all right, I forgot. Well, warm it up yourself. I don't care what you tell Vicki. I know she told me to take it out of the refrigerator. Well, I forgot it. I've been busy. Listen, I got other